nothing, and then it's like, conclusion. Get it together, girl. What are you trying to say here? So I thought, why not add my 2 cents of the books that I won't be reading? For whatever reason. Hello, book friends. Today I am doing the Anti-TBR Tag. I've seen this tag around for the last couple of years, and recently someone who I watched do this tag a couple of days ago. So I thought, why not jump in, give my 2 cents on the books that maybe I won't be reading. Just a disclaimer, I don't mean for this video to be negative or saying that I hate any of these books or authors or I don't think you should read any of them. These are all based on my own personal opinion and reading preferences, and I know a lot of these are going to be super unpopular opinions and they might get me into some trouble. Hopefully you find this enjoyable and know that I mean no harm. It's all in good fun, and I hope this will help you learn a little bit more about me and my reading preferences, and that way maybe you can trust my recommendations a little bit more in the future. You know, if I like something, maybe you'll like it too, or if I don't like something, maybe it means you'll like it. We're all so different when it comes to reading and our preferences, and that's what makes this community amazing, is that we all get to talk about it and disagree, and who doesn't love a good feisty argument? So question number 1 is, what is a super popular book that everyone seems to be loving, but you just have no interest in reading? For me, this has to be Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I'm just really not interested in Greek mythology. I don't know why, I just never have been. When I was in college, I did my fair share of reading Greek mythology because I was forced to, and I think that possibly turned me off of it even more. So I really have no good reason for not wanting to read Song of Achilles. It's just that I'm not into Greek mythology and it honestly just sounds boring to me. Number 2 is a classic book or author that you have no interest in reading. All of them, honestly. I am just not a classics reader. I've never really been interested in classics. I just really have no interest in them. Even in high school, we had to study the Shakespeare plays. Didn't care for them either. I did read a pretty hefty selection of classics when I was in college studying English, but I never really got into any of them. I read them purely because I was forced to. I didn't really enjoy it. I appreciate the historical aspect of a lot of these pieces, but I don't find them enjoyable or really interesting to read. Number 3 is an author whose books you have no interest in reading. So here's the thing. I try not to write off authors because of one piece that I didn't like or because of things that I've heard about them. I really do try to give everybody a chance. So the only one that I can think of off the top of my head right now, recently I started a book by Sarah Penner, and I only got about a quarter of the way through until I DNF'd it because some things happened in there that I just found too disturbing and I just couldn't go on. It just made me very uncomfortable. I feel like that might be just a stylistic preference, and so I probably won't be reading any more books by Sarah Penner. The second part of this question is, are there any authors that you wouldn't want to read based on them being problematic? In other videos I've seen Delia Owens is a popular answer for this, but for me, I'm going to take this question in a slightly different direction, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in a general sense. I have a little bit of a problem with the so-called fan fiction authors. These are the authors such as E.L. James, who wrote the 50 Shades series, and even authors such as Ali Hazelwood, which I didn't know her books were fan fiction based until after I read The Love Hypothesis. So my problem with these authors is not so much that I want to discourage fan fiction. I actually think fan fiction is great. I think it's great when people can take inspiration from something and create something of their own and just write things. Anytime people are writing things, that's amazing. What I do have a problem with is when they'll write something and then tout it as a fan fiction, as it is, and use that as a way to get exposure or just get eyeballs on their work. And then later on, they try to distance themselves from the original work. So we saw this happening with 50 Shades. It was well known that the 50 Shades series started out as a fanfiction of Twilight, but then later on, once the books got some traction, the author really tried to distance herself from Twilight and was trying to sell it like this was a completely original idea and this had nothing to do with Twilight. But by then, I mean, it was well known. And so I just think that's a little bit disingenuous. So I'm not saying I'm never going to read these works or support these authors, but it is just something that I keep in mind and bugs me just a little bit. Number 4 is an author that you've read a couple of books from and then decided that their books just aren't for you. I may be shooting myself in the foot by saying this, but I think maybe Colleen Hoover is going to be one of these authors for me. So I've only read one book by her so far, and that's November 9th. And my problem with it was that things that she considers to be sweet or romantic are uncomfortable to me, and they seem problematic. I've heard this said about other works of hers too, that sometimes that they contain problematic themes. I've heard this especially about the book Slammed, where the story involves a teenager being in a relationship with a teacher at school, and that is played off as being something romantic, and it's really not. It's kind of predatory. So yeah. So my problem with November 9th is, so the two characters were very young and they're starting a new relationship. And I found the male character to be pretty pushy. And you can kind of read between the lines of what I mean by pushy. The female character was okay with it, and she felt like it was romantic, and he thought he was being romantic. And maybe when I was a teenager or in my young 20s, I would have thought this situation and what this boy was doing was cute and romantic. But now as a 30-something, I just think it's gross. I think it's predatory. It's uncomfortable. If I had a teenager, I wouldn't want them reading this and thinking this is how relationships should go. So I just felt like November 9th in particular, because that's the one I can speak to, perpetuates some paternalistic and toxic dynamics in a relationship. And I just feel like based on this book and what I know about Slammed and what I've heard about other books, this is just going to be this author's style and what she writes about. And so I think I may find a lot of the books uncomfortable, but I'm not writing the books off. I probably will end up reading more of them. Maybe not I probably will end up reading some of them in the future. So I'm not promising I'm never going to touch these books, but who knows? Maybe I'm totally wrong and I will end up enjoying some of these books and not being grossed out by them. So we'll see. Number 5 is a genre you have no interest in or have just had a hard time getting into. For me, this has been like high fantasy and somewhat fantasy in general. I really wanted to love this genre because it's just so popular everywhere on BookTube, and I just wanted to expand out of reading just contemporaries. So I read several fantasy books and I pretty much had the same complaint about all of them. And it was just that they require so much world building that comes at the expense of well-developed characters. And particularly branching off from the well-developed characters is it loses the human nuance. And with so much focus on the setting and the world, I feel like the story just loses the little details that make the human experience. And so we have these characters that are, in my opinion, just so one-dimensional and flat, and so I just don't care about them. They just feel like cartoons, which maybe that's what is intended since this is a fantasy and it's not in the real world. I don't know, but I need characters that I can connect with. If not, I just don't enjoy the story because I feel like I can't connect with it and I don't care. I also feel like in these sorts of novels, the plot is just so big and momentous and epic that they just lack subtlety. Like, everything is so cut and dry, so good or evil, it loses any sense of realism. And I get that some people are looking for escapism in a book, and I am looking for escapism too sometimes. But I do feel like it needs to be grounded in at least the human experience, because that's what makes me care about the characters, care about the story, and feel like I'm reading it for a purpose because it's giving me some sort of lesson that I can take away in my own life. Number 6 is a book that you bought but will never read. This can also be a book that you unhauled or return to the library without reading. For me, this would be Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is a book that I was very excited to read. I borrowed it from the library, and when I was checking out, the librarian actually made a point to say, this book is amazing, you're gonna love it. And I was so happy to hear that. I was like, yes, I'm gonna love this book. After reading so many high fantasies that I didn't like, I thought this is gonna be the one. So at that point, I hadn't read Six of Crows yet. I was still waiting on that one to come in. So I sort of shelved this one. I sat on it for a little bit. Eventually, Six of Crows came in. I read that. And if you want, you can go and watch one of my previous videos. I shared my thoughts on Six of Crows in that video. But long story short, it just wasn't my favorite. It was another high fantasy that I just felt no connection to. And I thought the characters were uninteresting. And the story was just not something I felt like I could relate to or cared that much about. And so I was pretty disappointed. And so I decided I just wasn't going to read Crooked Kingdom. It was a pretty large book, and I just didn't want to make the time investment after having not really enjoyed the first book. So yeah, that was a little sad. I may read it at some point, but not today. Number 7 is a series that you have no interest in reading, or a series that you started but DNF'd. Okay, so after I finished the Crave series, I was just all about vampires. I needed more vampire content immediately. So I went out looking for a new series, and I stumbled upon Vampire Academy. This is a series that has been around for a while. I think it came out around like the Vampire Diaries era in the late 2000s, and I really did love the Vampire Diaries. So I thought I would enjoy the series, and also I picked it up because there were 6 books in the series, and I thought I'd be set on my vampire content for quite a while with 6 books. So I read the first book, and honestly, I could not find the plot anywhere. I looked high and low looking for the plot, and I just couldn't find any. So it was about these 2 vampire girls who are attending a school called the Vampire Academy. What else? That was about it. There was teenage drama, some boys. That's about it. And then there was a very rushed conclusion that I honestly don't remember. The pacing was just off. There was nothing, and then it's like conclusion. And that's it. Then it was just over. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not sure what just happened there, but I don't think I'm going to be reading the next book. I had borrowed probably the first 3 or 4 books from the library, and I just returned them all. It's not even that I don't think. I know I'm never going to pick up that series again. It just wasn't worth it. Number 8 is a new release that you have no interest in reading. I'm going to say Meant to Be by Emily Giffin. I've seen this book around recently, and to be honest, I've never read an Emily Giffin book. I've never been interested in reading them. So don't be like me and don't judge books by their cover. But I judge these books by their cover. All of the covers just look so boring to me. Like, they're so uninteresting. They look uninspired and generic. And so I just never wanted to pick up any of the books. This one has a slightly more interesting cover, just slightly more interesting cover. And so I was seeing it everywhere, so I thought I would look into it. So I read the synopsis, and I can just tell this is something that is going to annoy me. So basically, this book is following like American dream golden boy. He is from a rich, privileged family. He's conventionally attractive. Basically, it's a boy from the Kennedys. We all know the Kennedys. They're famous for being famous at this point. That kind of family. And then we have the girl who came from a rough background, but she is also conventionally attractive, and she was scouted by a modeling scout, and so now she's a model. So I'm thinking this is going to be just a damsel in distress love story. This boy is going to come and rescue this girl from her terrible life. And of course, he only noticed her because of her looks, and he's interested in her because of her looks. So he's going to just rescue her into his privileged, amazing American dream life that he didn't earn himself. I just feel like it's going to be glorifying generational wealth without any fair criticism of it. It'll be glorifying and perpetuating patriarchal stereotypes. Of course, I didn't read this book, and so all of these are purely assumptions. But I just feel like this book is going to be built on the American dream stereotype and patriarchal stereotypes, and I just don't have time for that. I've seen so many stories that are like that, and they're starting to annoy me. There are so many other stories in this world, so many other feel-good stories in this world than just the typical American dream story where the boy rescues the girl. I'm kind of over the fairy tales. It's a little bit out of touch to still be telling these same stories. So yeah, those are the books that I won't be reading, authors that I won't be reading, at least for the time being. I make no promises. There's a good chance I will change my mind about a lot of these books, and you will see them popping up in my monthly reading wrap-ups or TBRs. I don't know. Maybe if we're really lucky, they may show up in my end of the year favorites. Who knows? What books are you not going to be reading? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. And I will see you next time. Bye!